Hello, everybody. Thank you for sticking around. We are starting a little bit earlier than we originally planned because new release rundown and table takes wrapped up a little bit earlier, and then Dominic showed up from the office a little bit earlier than I expected. So instead of making you all wait for the most exciting part of the day where we talk about event submission in exquisite detail, I figured we would just get going. So you are...
I'm Dominic Lewis. I'm the events coordinator at Gen Con. One of 4 people as part of the events department, along with Derek. And then Marion and Jeanette are also part of our team. They're not able to be here today. We've had some weather-related things, so the dream of getting all 4 of us together around the table was not able to happen. But Derek and I are going to do our best to walk through some tips and some pointers and talk about different event types and programs that we have to give you a better sense of ideas you can do with running events at Gen Con.
Yep, the snowpocalypse ruined it all. But yeah, we're just going to kind of walk through some of the details from event submission. We covered the very initial basic ones last week.
Yeah.
And that covered an hour. So we figured now that event submission has been open for a week, and the deadline for early event submission is not until February 9th, I think?
February
8th or 9th. So we still have a little bit of time for you to get your events in early. Yep. And then the final deadline is March 8th, I think. So you still have a month and a half-ish to get your stuff sorted out before your events are late even. And so we figured we would kind of talk about different event types. We would talk about a few different programs there are at Gen Con. We would talk about some of the games that are in high demand that you might want to consider running. So why don't we go through some of that? So first, we have different event types that we wanted to try to talk everybody through.
Yeah.
And maybe we should navigate you to the website a little bit. So why don't we cut to us overlaid on the website. Great. So you should see that this is the staging version of the website. The main one looks basically the same. But just to reiterate, it's important to note that if you have any questions about submitting events, you need information about events or anything like that, click on Host. You're doing okay over there?
Yeah, I'm doing great.
All right. Click on Host. This has all of the important links. It has deadlines. It has a lot of useful information for you to kind of refer to. So check here first if you're trying to figure something out about events. If you can't find your answer here, then just email us and we'll get you squared away. Yep. It's also important that once you have submitted your events, you can click on your EOGM dashboard under Host. And anything that you've submitted will show up here. And you can kind of go back through previous years, although you will see that my test account here is not particularly active. So if we're going to submit an event, we click on Submit an Event. One of the key kind of parts of that is what event type you want to submit events for.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a laundry list. You can click on more information to get a little bit more detail on what those event types are. You can see the little icons we have for them. But they're still not 100% clear to everybody. So we figured we'd just kind of talk through them.
Yep.
So first, we have ANI, which is just anime activities.
Yeah.
So this could be anything from screening of anime events to a dance to game show, live action events with fans where they're going to try to get people to go through like the trivia of the show or something like that. It's basically if you want it to be part of the anime program, if it's primarily related about anime, then you can submit it as an anime event, and then it will get placed with those other events in that space. BGM is board game, and it should be pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
You're probably familiar with board games if you're coming to Gen Con, but this is probably more useful to talk about in how the category is different from the next category, which is CGM, and how both of those are different from another category down here called TCG. So basically, board game is most board games. You've got a board, you've got pieces, you've got tokens, you may have cards, you might have dice, all that kind of stuff. It's kind of a general catch-all. CGM, which is card game, this would be a non-collectible, non-tradable card game. So Uno, Three Dragon Ante, Killer Bunnies are several examples there. Most versions of Munchkin would be in there.
Yep.
But it's also different from TCG, where TCG is tradable card games. So something, it's Pokemon, Magic, stuff
Yep.
like that. But something like Netrunner or L5R, which are living card games, could go under CGM because they're not tradable. You know exactly what you're going to get. You might still build a deck. Dominion would be another example that's probably suitable for CGM. Guillotine would be another one that's suitable for CGM. The difference between CGM and BGM isn't super strict, but just keep in mind that you may have people who just look in one event type category or another. So it's useful to try to be as specific as you can, usually.
Yeah. That kind of, in general, is the one of the main purposes behind the events types, is that that's going to be a searchable filter for people when they're previewing the thousands of events that are available. So having your event fit the appropriate category is important if you want to attract people who are looking for events like yours.
So then, just to jump down to TCG, that is definitely the magic. You're buying, you're trading. A lot of times you're buying things in randomized booster packs and stuff like that. You're usually expected to come with your own deck, although there might be sealed or things like that. But if you're running even older dead games, your game doesn't have to be current if you want to run it at Gen Con. You just have to want to run it. You could, if you love, every year there's a Spellfire. Every year there's a guy who brings a bunch of Spellfire, which you have no idea what I'm talking about at all.
This is new to me.
Spellfire was like an old D&D TCG.
Okay.
And there's a guy who brings that every year and runs a big tournament of that. That would still be at TCG and stuff like that. So our next category is EGM, and that's just electronic game.
Yeah.
And again, it's a somewhat broad category because it's not the main focus of Gen Con. But if you play the game on a console, computer, phone, whatever, then it's probably an EGM game. It would be distinct from, like, if you're playing one of those games that uses an iPad to kind of run the bad guy or enhance the game, that would still be board game. But if it's entirely digital, EGM is the appropriate category. EGM is also one of those event categories that requires additional coordination with us, because for a board game, we just need to provide a table, and that table is going to work for whoever's going to come after you. So it's not super complicated for us to coordinate. But if you want to run a Halo tournament and you want 32 players for that, we don't happen to have 32 TVs and 32 Xboxes just available for you to kind of play that on.
Yeah.
So that's something where you would have to bring a lot of the equipment, or you'd have to partner with somebody, or there's other considerations that need to happen. So then we have Film Fest, and I believe you're in charge of this now, right? So why don't you talk about it?
Well, the Film Fest category is referring to Gen Con's Film Festival, which is primarily, and submissions are now open actually for that. There's a page on the website about that. So we collect submissions for people who want to preview their films they've been working on, short and long films, and then there's a contest that takes place, and so that's a huge portion of the film festival.
In the film contest, submitting for that is separate from submitting for events, because that is like most film contests, there's an admission fee, you kind of upload to a website, there's a lot of details that you fill out, and then there's a kind of a juried selection process.
Yeah, and maybe later we'll show where exactly that's located on the website. But yeah, it's an external application that you're applying for to submit your film. But there will also be events then based off of those, of the screenings, of any panels that come out of that. And then additionally, we also have workshops and anything from active workshops where you are learning some sort of technical element about film or filmmaking to different classes or discussions about a certain category of films or maybe how to get exposure for your films, or like tips for using YouTube as a tool or stuff like that. So there's a wide range of different types of events that would fall under the Film Fest category. The film contest is one portion of that, but again,
it's a significant portion.
It is a significant portion.
But it's not exclusively contest.
And we're trying to do more and more events that are not solely dedicated to the film contest. Trying to give more variety to that category. So, but anything related to film, for the most part, is going to be put in the Film Fest category. So
great. And where are most of the Film Fest events located, in case people don't know?
It's over in the Westin. There's 3 or 4 rooms in the Westin, a variety of sizes that we have large screenings for, and then smaller rooms that are more intimate for discussions and panels and stuff like that as well.
And the Westin is also where we have the anime events too.
Yes, yeah. So we use those rooms predominantly for those two categories, because there is a lot of screening and video opportunities there. So.
Great.
Yeah.
So then the next category is historical minis. That's HMN. And that also pairs in with the NMN non-historical minis. As you might guess from those two titles, that's kind of the distinction. So miniatures games, there is sometimes a little bit of a blurry line there. But for a miniatures game, usually it involves small plastic or metal or resin miniatures that have been painted up. You usually have a lot of them. Some games don't, but usually you've got a fair number. You usually move around terrain that isn't gridded. You have to kind of measure distance and stuff like that. Those are the defaults, but there are certainly exceptions to that. Some will use tokens, some will use gridded maps. But if you really want to emphasize kind of unit movement and combat element, historical miniatures and non-historical would be where those would go. There are some games like war games where you just have lots of cardboard chits that kind of bridge the gap and are a little bit in between board game and miniatures game. And in those kinds, you kind of have to do a case by case and see which category you feel more comfortable in. But the distinction between historical and non-historical is really just about the theme. If it's about history, if it's about the real world, if there's no real fantastical elements, then it's a historical miniature game. If there are those, if it's sci-fi, if it is fantasy, things like that, Warhammer, Privateer, Hordes, War Machine, things like that, those would be non-historical miniature games. So probably most people are playing non-historical, but historical is kind of carved out for like World War II and Napoleonics and stuff like that. So then we have,
and like with all other event types, but in particular here, like the table size is going to be different, default based off the expectation that these games are going to be more expansive and need more space.
So both of those categories, to that point, both historical and non-historical miniatures default to a 60-inch wide table. Whereas board games, card games, and tradable card games default to a 30-inch wide table. So when you submit your event, it's important to tell us what size table you need, because unless we happen to be intimately familiar with the game, we may not know that you've selected the wrong size.
Exactly.
So the next category is kids. That's just KID. And this is, again, another category that kind of bridges many activities. And the idea here is that these are events not that could accept kids or that are part of a larger program for kids, but are specifically just for kids or maybe even exclusively for kids, and we don't want adults participating in them. We have a training grounds area that's kind of set aside for that. There's a lot of like Haba games and stuff in there. There's a lot of activities in there. But if you have a thing that you want to do in that space with other events for kids, that's why you'd submit it in the kid activity.
What do we define as kind of the age range, or when we're talking, it's for kids, what do we precisely, not exactly,
yeah,
but
I mean,
like generality?
I think it depends. Like I would probably say like 10-ish or below. A lot of the kid events I think are really for below 8. Because 8 to 12, you start getting into a real spectrum of what individual kids are interested in and have the patience to sit through. And you'll have some people who, for example, would submit an RPG and say that it's for kids. And they do that because they want to get the kids that are looking in the RPG category. But if they wanted to target the people who are looking for activities for their kids to do, then they would put it in the kid category. And it kind of depends on what your intent is. Again, if you're looking to kind of attract RPG fans who happen to be kids, put it in RPGs. If you want to make sure that parents know that, hey, maybe their kid has never played RPGs before, they don't know if they're interested, but this is the kind of thing that you'd want them to try, then it might be more appropriate for the kid category. And I think Marion is in chat. I'm not sure. She said she was going to try to be. Marion is the one who's in charge of a lot of kid events. So she will be in chat to kind of answer any questions. If folks have other ideas or they want to know if something's suitable for the kid program, you can just ask in chat and she'll let you know.
Totally.
So then we have LARP, LRP, and LARP events are live action role playing. Now, if anybody's not familiar with that, it means that you basically get up and act out as much of what you're comfortable with. So different LARPs are going to have different lines or about what costumes they require, how much is in character, whether you have to kind of hold your hand up to indicate that's what you're saying. It's not like there's a wide spectrum there. And the different games should usually call that out. But this is the category for if you want to do more than sit at a table and talk. It also, most of these LARPs are going to have more than, say, the 6 to 8 players that most RPGs are going to have.
Yeah.
They're going to have a trained friend who stops by and says hi, apparently. But yeah, so a lot of the LARPs are going to be 30 players, 50 players, 100 players, those kinds of scale events. And what you end up with is a very different experience than a tabletop game, where instead of one table or one story that's shared by the table, you will kind of play through a LARP and you'll touch on these different stories. You'll have your own story and it will intersect with these other stories that are happening in other kind of subgroups in clumps of people. And then at the end of the game, it's really interesting to see if and how you connected with these other stories. LARPs are also different because they have a completely different default setup, obviously. LARPs don't happen on a table, they take up a whole room. So we have different expectations for what we need to place them.
Yeah. And usually we are placing people into rooms that have some tables, but not the entire room is full of tables.
Correct.
So
it's also worth noting that LARPs are not just something that you might, just because you have a character, like a role, doesn't mean it's automatically a LARP.
Yeah.
So for example, are you a werewolf or the Resistance or something like that? That's not a LARP. It's not a role-playing game. You might have a card that says you're a villager or you're a werewolf, but you don't have like a character or a backstory, and you're not really expected to role-play about how the weather was last week. You're expected to play your role, but it's a little bit different. Those events are going to go into Zed. But for LARP, it's very much like there's a story, there's storytellers, there's a character. Those kind of elements are key to the LARP. But again, as you can kind of see from what we're talking about, categories are somewhat arbitrary, and games being what they are, there are certain times where games will blur the lines between categories. So if you have questions, or if you feel your game should be in one category or another, you can certainly let us know. Just email us and ask. So then we have RPG, which, like board games, should be another kind of category that is kind of familiar to a lot of people. And this is, you sat around a table with some friends. One of you was probably the game master who led the story, and you all probably had your own character who did stuff, but there are exceptions to those. Fiasco is probably going to be an RPG, but it doesn't have a central game master. Or there might be, there's certainly RPGs that have a game master or have a group of players, but each player doesn't have their own character. They might swap characters, they might share them, or I think the Becoming is like a Greek tragedy RPG where there's only 4 players, one of them is the GM, and all the other 3 players are the game master who are all trying to mess up that one player, basically.
Very interesting.
Yeah, so there are always exceptions, games being what they are.
And so RPGs they default to a round table, a 5-foot round table. So we mimic that experience up to 6 seats, correct? 8 seats?
It depends. So the default is 6, but you can fit up to 8 around a lot of them. I don't really recommend it. But there are a lot of RPGs where that works fine, and there's a lot of, I think, culture around expecting 8 players at a convention RPG. So there are there's a fair number of people who want to replicate that. You just need to specify that in the special request field. So then there's also seminar events, and seminars are basically just panels. A lot of conventions will call them. You have people who are up at a head table, and they are explaining to everybody else in the audience a topic. They're discussing it back and forth with them. Maybe it's a debate. Maybe it's a presentation. Maybe it's a roundtable. There's a lot of ways to do it, but the idea is a central group of people mostly present information to an audience who may give some minimal feedback to it.
Yep.
And those are set up in that kind of theater style where you have a head table and then a bunch of tables facing it.
Yeah. And thus, when you're filling out that form as well, your max players for a seminar is your audience. It's not the number of people on a panel or number of people presenting. It's the number of tickets that are being sold, because that's how many people you are going to be presenting to. So it's just a good thing to.
Yep. So then there's also SPA, which are supplemental activities. And this is, again, another very nebulous category that bridges a lot of separate activities. So SPA events could be ZED, they could be workshops, they could be entertainment events, but the key kind of unifying factor is that they're not intimately connected to gaming. They're often of interest to gamers, but things that would go in the SPA category would be like a brewery tour or wine tasting, sushi making. Something like making a chainmail dice bag would probably be a workshop because it's a little more directly gaming. But like a class on how to knit in general might be SPA, because again, it's of interest perhaps, but not really closely associated with gamers, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Usually we have a lot of activities in the local area around indie that would be in this category.
Yep.
TCG, we talked about a little bit. Again, this is probably you're buying it in boosters. Chances are really high you're building your own deck to bring.
Yep.
There's a lot. Magic is obviously the king of that, but there's a lot of other games. Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, Square Enix has a bunch of. There's the Final Fantasy card game and stuff like that.
Yep.
So it's pretty straightforward. So then we have the workshop category, and we talked about this a little bit, but workshops are different from seminars.
Yeah.
Because workshops, you have a greater expectation that you will probably have hands-on experience with the activity you're doing, or at the very least, you will have one-to-one interactions with the presenter.
Yeah.
So you probably have a class of 20 or 30, at most even. You probably are making something, or you're probably getting something to take away. Like even if it's you could have a workshop on how to design a game, for example.
Yeah.
And you're not going to leave with a game.
No.
You're not necessarily going to leave with game components, but you might leave with like a packet or a booklet or something like that the presenter has put together, giving you some tips on it.
Yeah.
And then during the class, you might have done game design stuff. You may have been given components and asked to build something, or shown, given components of an existing game and shown how those kind of come together to make a quality game.
Yeah, there's a level of active participation with the attendees that may not necessarily be involved with the seminar.
Correct.
A seminar is more presentational. A workshop, there's some sort of active component, whether it's physically doing something or engaging in some sort of theory or concept that you are collectively working on.
Yep. The real expectation, I think, is that you leave the workshop with skills you didn't feel you entered the workshop with.
Exactly. Yeah.
So then we have Zed, and Zed is the Isle of Misfit Events, which is I think this story came up in Fireside at one point, where it's like, be careful what you name something, because that might end up being the name of it.
Yeah.
And the Isle of Misfit Events was what we named this when we couldn't think of a better name for everything that doesn't fit somewhere else, and now it's the name of it.
Yeah.
So this is, again, things that don't fit somewhere else. The big ones that go in here right now are the social deduction games like Are You a Werewolf? The puzzle rooms, the escape rooms that we have. So, activities like that. The Boffer Combat are often in there because they don't strictly have a character usually. You're just doing the combat. So things that don't fit elsewhere go here. So part of the reason why I bring it up too is that select this if you don't think that your game fits anywhere else. Zed is also what you would select if you have to run an event that has multiple games, because there's no way to list multiple game systems. So you choose Zed and you don't have to list the game system.
So if you were going to have some sort of package in your
some
event
weird,
that you're going to play 3 different games.
Some weird pentathlon or something of games. and you need to have it be one event and it can't be broken up for whatever reason, then listing it as a Z event is probably most appropriate. But I also just want to bring it up because it's a catch-all. You should always be checking the Z category to see if there's something different and weird in there that you haven't anticipated.
Yeah.
I think that we may have missed one event type.
We did not go over Trade Day.
We also didn't go over ENT.
And we did not go over entertainment events.
Okay, so there's a couple categories that aren't in this list because people don't usually submit them. First, there's ENT, which is entertainment events. And those are performances. Could be a comedy routine, could be musical act, could be a dance routine, I suppose. I don't think we've had one of those yet, but it could be. I know we've had a couple plays.
Yeah.
So ENT is just the category you choose when you want to have your performance viewed by an audience.
Yeah.
It's different from a seminar because that's a presentation, if that makes sense. Entertainment usually has a cost. Seminars are usually free, and entertainment is usually a lot more involved.
And we actually have a dedicated page on under the host tab as well that is just around entertainment and entertainment acts. At the very top one at the. So that gives a little more context into what we're talking about when we're talking about entertainment events at Gen Con. And then usually, as you mentioned, those are stuff that involves a little bit more communication with us directly and management of. So this is a great place to go over that, as well as looking in the event host policy to just get more information on, is what I'm talking about and actually an entertainment event. But yes, you can submit it as well. And those usually, we've got a variety of different stages as well, but there is what most people probably understand is there's the large main stage at Gen Con in the ICC, and that is where we have events going on all the time, all these performative events. And some of these may be streamed as well, too, or have some streaming components.
We've got a couple other stages that are kind of spread around the convention.
Yep.
So the other two categories that we didn't cover, one is Trade Day Adventures. That's not one that most people would submit. I just want to mention as we're going through event types because that's just the category that True Dungeon goes into. They kind of manage everything that goes through that space. Then we have TRD, which is Trade Day. And Trade Day is, again, another kind of thing that bridges a number of activity types.
Yeah.
But the uniting factor with Trade Day is that they're all on Wednesday, and all of the events are specifically targeted at retailers, educators, librarians, with a little bit of like publisher and press involvement.
Yeah.
But those first three categories are who these events are for, basically. So if you wanted to give a presentation or a seminar or a panel or something on how to run a retail store, or let's say, to even narrow it down, how to market yourself as a local retail store.
Yep.
You could run it as a seminar over the full weekend of Gen Con, or you could submit it as a Trade Day event. You could do both.
You could do both, yeah.
But you could submit it as a Trade Day event, and then it would be placed on Wednesday with the other kind of professional events specifically for those kinds of attendees. And that's kind of how a lot of our programs work. Like other similar programs that aren't also event types are things like puppets, cosplay. I couldn't think of any other offhand when I was initially making some notes. Like Gen Con being the kind of almost 50-year-old, no, more than 50-year-old beast that it is, having grown organically over the years through a very changing, game industry, has a number of kind of like groups of games and organizations and things like that. The line between officially recognized program and it's just this is how it's always been at Gen Con is very thin sometimes.
Yeah. I think too on the Trade Day events too, like one of similar, if you've seen some of our episodes of Table Takes, where we have Hawk Robinson coming from RPG Research, and he talks a lot about how to incorporate RPGs and tabletop games into the classroom. Like those are types of things that would fit well on a Trade Day as well too. Like there's some stuff that not just for industry professionals, but perhaps it is somebody presenting something of value to educators or to explore a topic towards that.
Yeah, well, that's also a good note, is that if you are watching this and you are an educator or a librarian, or you know somebody who is,
Yeah.
you should let them know about trade day events so that they can, because I know there's like professional, continuing professional improvement or education credits and stuff like that. There's a lot of really kind of exciting ways that are of presentations and seminars that talk about how to incorporate games into those environments and the benefits thereof.
Exactly.
Yeah, so you should tell them to go.
Yeah, it's a great program. And again, that's on Wednesday. It's there's a separate badge that is for Wednesday access to that. But yeah, it's a great program we have, and like many of the things we do, there's a wide variety of different things that are pitched there. So,
so a couple of programs that we wanted to mention. One of them, as we kind of alluded to, is puppets.
Yep.
There's a whole kind of category or group of events that are all related to puppetry. Sometimes we even have a puppet guest. This is something else that Marion is in charge of.
Yep.
She's in charge of a lot of these weird programs. Do we?
Not necessarily
Is that what
weird.
we do for her?
There's some.
We give her the strange programs that don't have their own categories.
I don't think strange is the way to
Strange,
categorize.
weird, odd, exciting.
I would say there are things that there's a level of interest that has been presented that makes these fit within their own group, but not enough to have its own dedicated event type.
And then we give all those to Marion.
And yes, a lot of those end up with Marion.
Yep. So puppets is one that she's been working on for a little while now.
Yeah.
There's I think one of the evenings has Puppet Slam.
Yep.
Which is like, it's a bunch of puppets, kind of. It's a very like ad hoc improvisational thing, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
I think it's a little skip based in some of it. So. Puppets would be a program that you could kind of submit to be part of if you wanted to. Cosplay is obviously another huge part of attending almost any convention. Yeah.
And that has its own program built around it, but that means that there's seminar events and workshop events that are related to cosplay. There might be some entertainment events related to it too.
And we have some larger, like the costume contest, the parade, etc. There's some large events too that are related to that program as well.
So then, not quite a program, but somewhat similar that I wanted to kind of talk about was charity. Gen Con tries to raise a lot of money for charity every year, and one of the ways that we do that is to have events where the revenue for those events feeds to charity. So if you're running events and you want that money to go to charity, you can request that happens. You just need to email us to let us know that you want to do it, and then when you add an additional fee to your events, you can just put in Gen Con charity for the name, the payment name, and the payment address.
Show them where that is.
Yep. So if I wanted to make this event, this hypothetical event, benefit charity, I might say I want to add $2 per ticket, and I want that money to go to charity. So I would just type in Gen Con charity and Gen Con charity, and then when we have done all of our reconciliation and ticket reconciliation and determining who needs to get sent what checks, all the events that are benefiting Gen Con charity will kind of be rolled up into one, and we'll know to send that to, I believe currently we are selecting 2 charities a year.
Yep, and we're in the vetting process right now and decision-making process on that. So
I think the general kind of theme we do is we try to select one charity local to Indianapolis.
Yep.
And we try to select one charity that relates to gaming, whether or not it's necessarily in Indy. But if you kind of fill this information out when you submit your event, we'll review it, and if it's approved, then your revenue will go to the charity as well.
Yeah. So it's just, I think, a great thing for us to let people know that this is that option there, and that you have the capacity to do that. So if you are interested in having your ticket fees go directly to the charities that Gen Con is sponsoring for that year, you can do it this way. You don't need to collect it all and then donate it in some fashion after the fact.
You're welcome to do so if you want, but it's nice to kind of bundle it together so that we can include everything.
Yep.
Great.
And it's also good with those events too to include for charity or charity in both the title and description of those events too, so it's clear to people participating, because there's a lot of people who come to Gen Con and they seek out these charity events in particular. They want to be a part of those. So having that in there helps, so that it's a keyword when people are searching through events.
Yep. So I think that covers most of event types, kind of the programs, things like that. So why don't we just take a quick moment and just let chat know that if they have any questions about event submission, event types, things like that, let us know. We are happy to try to address those as they come up. So just post in chat, and we will answer it as best we can.
Yep. There's a puppet wrestling suggestion from behind the production table back there.
I mean, that seems reasonable. I have a feeling it would work better with hand puppets than, say, marionettes.
I think our response is, Marcus, submit the event that you want to run, and if it's puppet wrestling, we'll...
Marcus, figure out what your schedule is like, and figure out what puppet wrestling looks like.
Do you want to go over just a couple while we're in the submission form,
Sure.
a couple like common things to just remember as well? Last week we went over the event submission form in good detail. So there's a video on our YouTube of that episode in full, as well as a brief portion of just the walking through the event submission form. But a couple like common things to remember as well from that. You want to capitalize your titles for your events, correct? But you don't want to use all capitals in your title. So don't caps lock your entire title.
Correct.
But capitalize the words in your title.
So
because otherwise we're going to do that for you in that.
What it kind of boils down to is double check your grammar and spelling. Your computer has a spell check. Please use it. It has a grammar check. Please use that. Not because I'm saying that everybody needs to have perfect grammar, but just those tools are there to help you improve things, and it saves us the time we have to do to fix it all too.
Yep.
Especially because a lot of games will have really weird terms, and sometimes, usually we know what to correct, but not always. Which is probably worth noting that if we do make a change to your event that you think is wrong, you can just tell us.
Yeah.
So it's okay. Just tell us that it's wrong. Let us know what it should be, and we can correct it.
Yep. Additionally, we note here, just you don't want to duplicate information across multiple fields. We give, in this event submission form, we give you specific fields for specific reasons. That to effectively use the form, when you're filling it out, use the field where that is appropriate to put that information in. So you don't need to list the game in your title and your short description and your long description, list if it is the game system, listed in the game system.
Yep.
If it don't copy your short description and paste it into your long description. You don't need to duplicate that both times.
Yeah. Again, a general rule of thumb is only put information in one field unless there is a extremely compelling reason otherwise. So the strict example of this is RPGs.
Great.
So if you're going to run D&D because you've played D&D once now? Twice?
Once.
Great. So you played D&D once.
Many years ago, once.
Oh, I thought you played at the... Well,
I have not played at the office yet. So.
Okay, well, we can fix that. But you've played D&D once.
Yeah.
You're going to Gen Con and you are going to run it.
Bold.
Yep. That's the kind of person you are.
Yep.
You are
Go-getter.
bold and you are a go-getter. So you're going to come to Gen Con and you're going to run D&D. What are you not going to do?
I'm not going to say D&D as the title of my
Correct.
event. I'm going to pick whatever scenario I'm running for my event, and that's going to be in the event title instead.
So an example might be, right now I'm running Eberron for my kids, for the kids I run on Wednesday. So Eyes of the Lich Queen would be the event title, okay? And then the game system would be Dungeons & Dragons.
Yeah.
And then the description would not be Eyes of the Lich Queen for Dungeons & Dragons. It would be, an Eberron campaign, spanning, history or something like that. It was something interesting and enticing.
Yeah.
And then I would not then copy that into the long description and just have both of them be exactly the same.
Yep.
So that's the kind of extreme situation where, for RPGs, we're pretty strict about it.
Yeah.
Game system, it's the only place your game name goes in. Doesn't go in the event title, doesn't go in the short description, doesn't go anywhere else.
Doesn't go in all.
Your event title doesn't repeat in the short description.
Yep.
Your short description doesn't repeat in your
Yeah.
Save us the time of having to remove that by not putting it in there in the first place.
And make it easier for people viewing your event to see what your event is about, because they're going to see the field and then they'll see the response to that field.
Yep. Don't put your game system in both game system and rules edition.
Yeah.
I guarantee you that there is no D&D edition of D&D. There's a first edition, there's a second edition, but there's not a D&D edition of it. So that's the strict side.
Yeah.
A somewhat more loose is like a board game. Let's say that what was one of the games you bought last year? Do you remember?
Hadara.
So, great.
Games.
Great. So you bought Hadara last year at Gen Con.
Yeah.
You liked it a lot.
Yeah.
You want to bring it to Gen Con and you want to play it with friends. The event title could just be Hadara. Could be play Hadara, could be casual Hadara, could be competitive Hadara.
Learn to play.
Yep, it could, make the title clear about what you want to do.
Yeah.
But you are allowed to put it in the title because a lot of times for board games, there's not a scenario, there's not a narrowing down of thing. It's you're playing the board game.
Yeah.
So then you would put Hadara in the game system. But that's all. You don't need to put Hadara in the short description. It's in the title, it's in the game system.
Yep.
The short description is just, instead of saying Hadara is a game, just say a game about.
Yep.
How would you summarize Hadara?
It's another civilization building game.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. So then,
Yep.
so then, under short description, don't say Hadara is a civilization building game. Just say a civilization building game, period, or whatever else.
Yeah.
And then say, come play with me.
Yeah.
I love this game. I want to share it with people. Or come say, this is a casual event. Did you want to always check this out and didn't have a chance? Come play, no pressure. Or is this competitive? Just say, this is a competitive, game. We are going to be on task. Bring your A game kind of thing.
Yep.
Yeah, so don't duplicate information. It
Yeah.
saves us a whole lot of time when we're reviewing your events.
Another reminder about minimum and maximum players. Those are related to the number of tickets that are going to be available for your event.
Yep.
If you are playing in the event as the EO or GM, and in addition to hosting that event, don't offer yourself a spot in there in the number of players, because that will add an additional ticket to the number of people. So if you have 5 people playing the game, but you're also going to play, you would have 4 maximum players because you're going to have 4 tickets available for that.
Yep.
With regards to seminars and panels or workshops or some sort, the number of players is going to refer to the number of people not participating from from the presenting point of view, but the number of people that you are going to serve.
And that would apply to seminars, entertainment events, workshops, anything that basically has an audience. The maximum number of players is the audience.
Exactly.
And then minimum number of players, this is really the minimum number of players that you need to make this event happen.
Yeah.
And honestly, in almost every case, the minimum number of players is going to be 1 because you're running the game.
Yep.
1 player showed up, it's probably enough. But if your game requires 3, minimum number of players is 2 because then you're the third.
Yeah.
But if you're running a tournament and you need 8 players for this tournament to fire, then you list 8. Even if 8 is also your maximum. If you're only running an 8-player tournament, you need 8, or you're not doing it, and your 8 is the maximum, you can put 8 as both. Keep in mind that maximum number of players is the number of tickets that can be sold. It's the amount of space we've reserved for your event. Minimum number of players is the number of people that you need to make the event happen. And if you have fewer than those people show up, then you may have to cancel the event. Yep. Those are the key important things. Max players is not the number of players you would like to show up. It's not the number of players that you think you could possibly ever accommodate.
Yes.
It is the number of seats that will be reserved.
Yeah, so don't submit 9,999 because you have an unlimited number of people you can serve.
I guarantee you that if you submit 999, we will A, laugh about it, and then B, change it.
Yeah.
So please don't make us laugh.
Speaking of changes, one of the things for people to be aware of is after you submit your event, it will eventually be reviewed by us. We make changes to your event across a variety of fields. Commonly, the number of players is one that we may reduce or adjust in some sort of fashion. We will also, from time to time, include what is called a GC comment, or that's how it's referred to on the form. So when it gets sent back to you, you will get an email notification of those changes that have been made. It's still, regardless if you find that email or you get that email or not, those changes also can be viewed through your EOGM dashboard.
Yep, which you can always get here. Just go to host, go to EOGM dashboard. And again, any events you submit will be right here.
Yep, and you will, regardless, check there because you're responsible for how your event goes through the process. So if we make changes, note that we made those changes. If there's an issue with those changes, email us.
Yep.
If there are comments that we've written in the GC comments section, read those comments so you get a better understanding of where we are missing information from you or we have questions about what you submitted so that you can help us address that and we can move your event along the submission process.
That's a good point too, is that if we send your event back to you for correction, do not resubmit it without making any changes.
Yep.
So like if it was sent back to you for correction, that was for a reason. Check the comments to see what that reason was. If it's not clear to you from those comments what you need to change for your event, then it's okay. Just email us. We may have made a mistake. We may have not been clear. Just email us and say, hey, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to update. Can you help me?
Yep.
And we will.
Yep. Yeah, the last thing you want is to get stuck in this cycle of submitting and us returning it to you and not changes being required to then move it back on. And we just do the circular.
Honestly, that cycle is only going to last a couple times before we just reject your event.
That's true as well.
We're only going to let that last for so long.
But yeah, overall point is to monitor your events through the review process so you see any changes that have been made and or anything that's holding it up from being approved. Additionally, a couple of common changes we may change the time or the date of the event, and usually when we do that, we'll also make some sort of comment to that. But regardless, make sure that that is the case, that you're double checking your events so that they're still running at the times that you submitted it for, or that you recognize that we moved the time of your event.
Yeah, so like in most cases, we can accept the time that you requested.
Yep.
But in the times that we can't, we try to change it to the nearest time that we can make fit.
Yep.
So it's still your responsibility to make sure that whatever time we changed it to fits in your schedule. So if your schedule is super tight, we may not be aware of everything that you're involved in. If something has changed so it's a conflict, you need to let us know, and then we can look at what other options there are.
And particularly, usually with some of the larger events, either large LARPs or seminars or panels or workshops, those types of events, we may move the time just because we have a limited number of venues that can supply what is needed at the scale of some of those events. So those often tend to be the events that do get adjusted for time. Usually with board games or RPGs, we're able to pretty much nail about the time that people are submitting it for. And then another common request is, or that may get changed, or that you definitely want to follow up on, is if you've requested some sort of special request you've submitted, we may or may not be able to provide it. It's a request, and we will do our best to fulfill it, but it's possible that we may not be able to do that. So we may ask you if we can change something about it, or if you would be able to run your event without power or something like that, or without an AV setup. So those are a couple of the common changes that we make during the review process. But overall, the point is monitor your events through the process so that you are responsible for knowing how your events have been changed and being sure that how they've been changed still works for you in your schedule.
And think about it this way, like we have 20,000 events to go through.
Yeah.
You probably have somewhere between 1 and maybe 20.
Most people have.
So, you've got a couple of events to keep an eye on, so keep an eye on them. We've got a lot, so we do our best, but we don't catch everything. So if anything seems weird or confusing, let us know.
Yeah.
Any other tips we had noted?
There's avoiding large spikes in the types of events you're running. So if you're consider, instead of running a 100+ player tournament, consider maybe running 3 instances of 32 player tournaments of the same thing. It's a better experience for the attendees in some of those fashions. But more importantly, we are far more likely to be able to fulfill that amount of request at those scales, because they don't take as much room or need as much dedicated space for a longer period of time.
I mean, the times that I have space for a 128-person tournament are much more limited than the times that I have space for a 32-person tournament.
Exactly.
And you can have 4 entry rounds for 32 players that adds up to 128.
Yep.
And then you let those players know which ones advanced on.
Yep. And then I guess do we want to talk just in generalities, a couple key times of events, or times of events to work around?
Yeah. So when you're submitting your events, the peak times are going to vary based on event types. I think seminars and stuff that fill rooms, it's hard to say what the peak times are. Most of the day, I think it is. So for those, pick the ones that you find accessible or that fit your schedule. But keep in mind that it's very likely you won't get the exact time that you want.
Yep.
Again, we'll try to accommodate as best we can, but it will probably have to be moved, and you have to review that. For other games, for most games, like board games, role-playing games, things like that, you're probably looking at 1 p.m. to 4 p.m.-ish on Friday and Saturday are generally the peak times. Thursday is often a big peak for a lot of things too. So if you can avoid that afternoon time, if you can run your game in the morning, in the evening, it's usually a lot easier to accommodate. It's not saying that we won't accept your game, but if you submit your game late, particularly, try to avoid those times.
Yeah.
Or if you're running a large event, like if you're running an RPG and you need 5 tables for it, it's way easier for me to find 5 tables in a room in the evening than it is during the day.
Yep. Another great tip too is when you're thinking about good times for to have your events running is the exhibit hall is only open for a certain period of time, and the exhibit hall itself attracts a large amount of foot traffic both to and from. So the exhibit hall is open from 10 to 6 each day. So having events that you run, doing it within the windows of 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. or 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. It's a great opportunity because a lot of people, when the exhibit hall closes, they're looking for something else to do prior to going to their next thing, or if they have dinner in the evening or whatever. So those are great times for just the kind of foot traffic of the convention center shifts a little bit. So those are good times to think about when you're submitting your events too. And
it's also worth noting that the amount that time influences your event really depends on the type of event.
It's true.
Because like a 6-player RPG, the time the exhibit hall is open, it's not really going to matter.
Yeah.
You're probably not next to the exhibit hall. You only need 6 players. It's not really a big deal.
Yep.
But if you have that big tournament, or if you are running demos, or you're running a game that is, half hour to play or an hour to play kind of thing.
Yeah.
And those might be things that you might want to run starting at 8 or 9 a.m. because you know that you're going to have people walking by you on the way to the exhibit hall.
Yep.
And they want something to do. Things like that.
Yeah.
For LARPs, another one to note times, LARPs tend to be very competitive in the evenings and less competitive during the day, less crunch. So if you want to run a LARP and you haven't run one before or you're just kind of starting out, it's usually easier for us to find space for it before, say, 5 p.m.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that too brings up a good point. Like we have events running 24 hours a day. So if you want to run a late night event, you can certainly do so. There's a lot of events that we have that start at 10 p.m. or later. And there's a livelihood to the convention with events at all hours. So yeah, go ahead.
Oh, that does remind me of the other thing though, of if you submit your event for 2 a.m.,
Yeah.
we'll be like, sure, they want to run Catan at 2 a.m. Great, here's your table at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
You may have meant 2 p.m. We don't know that. The show is 24 hours a day, so double check your times.
Yeah. So there's kind of two sides to that coin, but it's another tip as far as when you're thinking about how to structure your events.
Yeah, like Magic, for example, there's the official Magic events.
Yeah.
But I know every year there's, I want to say like 3 tournaments that are run by just fans that often start at like 11 p.m. or midnight. Like I think there's one where there's if I remember correctly, he's an IP lawyer, and his event is basically play Magic with an intellectual property lawyer. And it's like, cool, the event fills every year. People hang out and play Magic and talk about intellectual property at 1 in the
Yeah.
That's what happens.
We love events like that too, where the opportunities for people to be unique and creative about their events are great. That's part of what makes having 20,000 events fantastic, is because there's such a wide range of ideas and different levels of, anybody can submit an event. Anybody can submit an event for a narrow interest that they may have and find that there are other people at Gen Con who would be interested in that too.
I guarantee you that your narrow interest probably has at least 5 or 6 other people who are interested in playing it.
That's a great phrase.
Well, I also feel like I need to note that every time I look up, our production crew appears to be wearing another layer of clothing. I don't know if you can tell by the amount of hand wringing that Dominic and I are doing, but even I, Derek Guder, find this weather to be chilly.
Yeah. Anything else, like in particular, we want to talk about?
So I think we had some notes to cover GM badges and hotels.
Yeah.
But I think about the event submission process, unless chat has any questions.
Oh,
I don't know what else to cover.
No. I guess just reiterating, the early event submission period of time is currently ongoing. That goes until February 8th. Then at that point, from February 9th through March 8th is the normal event submission period. And then anything after March 8th, anything submitted after that is late. And we cannot guarantee that we will be able to place that event. We do so as we have time and space remaining to do so. So if you have an event that you want to make sure definitely gets in the event catalog or in time for event registration, make sure you get it in before March 8th. And just note that if you submit after that point, we will still look at it if we have time to do so, but it's not a guarantee that we'll be able to fulfill that.
The other thing that occurred to me to note is our forums.
Yeah, great.
So there's two forums that are event related that people probably want to be aware of. One is the events forum.
Yeah.
This is just the forum for attendees to talk about events. So if you have submitted an event that you want to generate attention for, you want to let people know about, post about it in here and explain why you're so excited about it. Don't just list it and say, hey, I'm running Catan.
Yeah.
Explain why you love Catan and why your event is cool.
Yep.
This is also a place where you can kind of see what else people are doing, maybe recruit some people to help you out. Another forum to check out is the Event Organizers and GMs forum. So this is a place to go if you have a question, but maybe it's not just for Gen Con, or maybe you want to see if somebody else has asked the question, or you want to get other advice from other event organizers. Go here, post your question, and people will chime in with an answer.
Yeah. There's a great resource. Like the community at large, like odds are if you're asking a question about something, it's something that somebody else has had a question about before, and or somebody's had an experience with before that they're willing to share and maybe give you suggestions on how to approach what you're trying to do.
Yep. So another thing in here that I wanted to draw attention to was, it looks like I haven't actually updated it for 2019 yet, but this is a list of high demand games from the past year based on ticket requests when registration opened that year.
Yeah.
So this is a really good thing to refer to if you've decided you want to run a game, but you're not sure what to run, and you want to run something that you know is going to have attendance. If you go through this list, you can see that these are all games, these are all RPGs that had way more demand than they had supply for.
Yep.
Now the scale is going to be very different. Like D&D, obviously, had a lot of demand, more demand than it had supply for. But so did, Mouse Guard, somewhere in here, like Mouse Guard. Mouse Guard didn't have enough games to fill all the people who wanted to play it. Not to the same degree as D&D did, but again, if you're operating on like an individual scale and you're just going to run 1, 2, 3 sessions of these games, all of these events had hundreds of unserved tickets. So running a session, you should be able to pretty reliably expect it to fill.
Yep.
So it's a good way to just check to see what do people at Gen Con want to play. Maybe I'll go run that. Maybe my favorite game is in there and I like to run it with people. Or maybe you wanted to sign up for one of these games and you didn't get a spot, so now you're going to run it to make sure that you do get a time to play it, and other people do too.
Exactly.
So I break it down for RPGs, and then we have some miniature. We'll see some board games, card games. Some other kind of call outs and things like that. Yeah. So if you aren't sure what to run, go to the forum, look at one of these threads, ask whatever question you have, and you should kind of get inspiration, get details that you need, stuff like that.
Totally. While we're here just thumbing through, I guess a couple other just references we'll point out real quick. Again, the host page is going to be your main resource for all things regarding running and managing events at Gen Con. So all types of different files and links and explanations on the process of how to do so. You're going to find the hub of all that here. Of note, the event host policy is always a great primary resource to look at. It covers everything that you can and can't do. It talks about defaults for certain event types, for example.
It's our comprehensive guide to event organizers and game masters.
That sounds very specific. It's almost like you read it off. So this is a great place to be. The host page as well has some links for different forms that will be up. So when you're applying for GM badges or for if you have special requests for events or packages of events you're running, stuff like that.
So there's a link to the forum.
Yep.
There's a link to sign up for the email list that you are in charge of.
Yeah, so the EOGM newsletter is a newsletter we send out every couple weeks or so, and it ramps up as we go along, but it's just a reminder of upcoming deadlines or new applications that have opened or new forms that have been that are available, as well as just giving general ideas about when we're approaching certain periods of time. So
how very fancy, it's general information.
Yeah, that was slip of the tongue there. I got a little fancy. Yeah, so if you just wanted to know that you're going to get updates on when deadlines are coming up, great way to do so is just signing up for the newsletter, the GM email list.
I think we'll come back to electronic ticketing in a minute because I'm sure you have a lot to say about that. But this is also where GM badge allocation form is, the special request form. So like if you need GM badges, you submit the form here. If you have needs for your events that didn't seem appropriate to put on the individual event, like if you submit 30 events and they all need to be in a special space, submit the special request form. This is where you can also request different types of hotel rooms. The labels that we have on envelopes are here so that you can print your own and pre-label them before Gen Con to save yourself the headache of doing it on site. If you're running an active event that involves people kind of moving around a lot or using equipment, you have to have them sign a consent waiver. Those are available here.
Any sort of physical activity, that's where that waiver is for. So.
After the show, if you need reimbursement for your badges or hotels, those are here. So I think we've kind of covered most things, again, unless chat has any questions. And I think maybe the next thing to kind of cover would be electronic ticketing. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, we can briefly go over that. And actually, if you want to click that link real quick, here is the e-ticketing information for event organizers. So all the information you need about what electronic ticketing is, how it works, what you need to do to be able to participate is going to be centralized here.
Dominic, do you want to give me a quick summary of what electronic ticketing is and how it works?
Yeah, so electronic ticketing is our new innovation at Gen Con that we've been growing on a year-to-year basis. And
this is the third year.
So the third year of significant use. And so there has been some groups and more events over the years have been electronically ticketed.
Like True Dungeon, for example, was one of the first groups to use it. And they've been completely electronically ticketed for a full 2 years now.
Yes, yeah. So because of the success of that and our ability to kind of slowly ramp this program up, this year we're making the opportunity for EOs themselves to be able to request it during the event submission process. So in the submission form, there is a ticketing method field, and it's going to ask you, and it's a required field, to say either paper or electronic. Paper refers to the process that most people are familiar with, and the process that's been at Gen Con for a while is attendees who purchase a ticket for your event, they get a physical paper ticket. You, as the EO or GM running the event, collect those tickets when they show up for your event. You then package them together in labels, and you turn them into Event HQ. And then after the convention, Gen Con, over the course of a few weeks, scans and reconciles all those tickets. Electronic refers to the option of going electronic ticketing. Electronic ticketing gets rid of a lot of that. Basically, it sums it down to, instead of having to collect and turn in paper tickets, attendees' event tickets are actually attached to their Gen Con badge. And all you have to do then, as the EO or GM, is scan the badge of the attendee and automatically redeem their ticket. We have two different ways you can do that. You can use it a mobile phone, either a late model iPhone or Android, with the Gen Con mobile app, or we have a web browser version that you can use as well using a laptop and a barcode scanner if you have that.
Yeah, although that's probably more likely for like a bigger company or a bigger group to use their HQ or something like that.
Yeah, but so there's two different options of going about it though, and using those two tools, you're able to scan tickets, scan badges to redeem the tickets for the event. There's great benefits like the tickets are automatically redeemed, so you can see that updated right away. You don't have to wait the weeks after the show, like you do often have to do with paper tickets. You're able to sell tickets for your event directly to an attendee.
So you don't need to accept generics or anything like that?
You don't need to, but if you still do or still choose to do so, you can. We're still kind of living in this world where we have both options. So
we'll be in that world for a while, yeah.
For a while. So, and that's why it's important when you're going through and submitting your events that you select the appropriate ticketing method for your event. You also need to submit an e-ticketing certification form, certification request form. That is just a form that you need to fill out once, and actually you can click on that. And that form is just going to ask some questions to give a greater sense of kind of your overarching plan. So whether you're running one event that's e-ticketed, or if you're running 100 events that are e-ticketed, or you have a mix of some of your events are e-ticketed and some are paper, irregardless, if you have at least one electronic ticketed event, you have to fill out the e-ticketing certification form. That helps us make sure that you affirm that you know what you're doing, that you know how you're going to go about educating your other people who are scanning badges for you, et cetera, that you have the right technology. So you need to fill out that form as well. So the main steps are, if you want to participate in e-ticketing, when you submit your event, make sure you select electronic as the ticketing method. Make sure you submitted one electronic ticketing certification request form, and then make sure you've added what we would call e-ticket masters, which could be your GMs, you could be any event staff or people you have assisting you. It doesn't need to be the person actually running the event, but add them to the GM field, and then that will give their account access to be able to scan badges for your events. So yeah, that's kind of the overarching how-to. We're really excited about this. Like this process, we think is really streamlining and a great innovation for people to consider as they're planning for their events.
And if somebody's curious about the details of whether they should use it for their event, you go to host, go to electronic ticketing for GM or for EOs.
Yep.
There's a little video that explains how it works. There's a bunch of information here, and then if you have any questions beyond that, just email us.
Yep.
And then I'll probably just make you answer it.
Oh yeah, I'll probably be answering most of those questions. And then we'll have additional resources over the course of the spring as we have them available. They'll be linked here. They'll be in the newsletter, et cetera, et cetera. So.
Anything else you want to talk about with regards to electronic ticketing?
No, I'm just really encourage people to take a look at this and consider this. And then if you've submitted your events, make sure you've done all steps of the process. You need to do all those steps. If you don't, then we may not be able to approve your events for e-ticketing. We may revert them back to paper.
Okay. So I still don't think we have any questions. So why don't we, in kind of maybe the 10 minutes or so we have remaining, why don't we cover GM badges and hotels? Maybe?
Yeah, let's dive
into
that.
So just very, very quickly. I'm going to have the event host policy up here because a lot of what we're going to talk about is in here.
Yeah.
This will kind of be more detail in the background. But at a very high level, when you run events, that Gen Con base price comes to Gen Con. It's not something that you're paid unless you add an additional fee on top of it. But that Gen Con base price goes to cover badges and hotels that you might need to run your events. And in almost every case, it's just you need 70 player hours to run events. Your player hours are usually the duration of the event times the number of players for the event. There are some exceptions, which is just kind of why I'm hedging my language a little bit. But in most cases, and for most people who are going to be watching this who don't already kind of run a large volume of events, that's basically it. So if you, Dominic, are going to run a couple of events by yourself, then you just need to make sure that you have gotten 70 player hours. So if you're going to run D&D, and you want it to be 4-hour sessions, and you want to have 6 players, that's 24 player hours per session of D&D that you run. So you need to, that's like 3 or 4?
Three full sessions
Something like
would be
that.
72.
Yeah, so I think that's, you know what, I suspect I did that math intentionally. Anyway,
There's a rationale behind the math.
it's one of those things of you make decisions years ago, and now you're like, yeah, that's probably why I did it.
Yeah.
So you run 3 events. You have generated enough player hours to earn your badge.
Yeah, and to talk about, a GM badge gives you the same access as a regular attendee badge. So you don't need both an attendee badge and a GM badge.
Correct.
GM badge is essentially going to override that attendee badge and give you the same coverage. GM badge, if you qualify for the requisite number of player hours, you can request to have a complimentary GM badge.
Correct.
So then you don't have to purchase an attendee badge.
It's also worth noting that you don't have to have a GM badge to run events.
Yes.
If you have an exhibitor badge, an attendee badge, a press, whatever else, you can run events. You just need a valid badge.
Yeah.
So if you, let's say again, Dominic, you have run enough events to earn a badge.
Yep.
Now there's kind of the next kind of question is, if you didn't put a gaming group on those events, if you just submitted them, under your own name basically, then you submit for your reimbursement after the show. So you still just buy an attendee badge, you do your everything as normal. After the show, you fill out that badge reimbursement request form. We get your details, and you are reimbursed afterward. But if you added a name to your events so that we could group them together and kind of handle them as a package, even if you're the only person in that group, then you can request the GM badge allocation, which is what that form is for. You'll have the ability to then assign the badges as you need, that kind of thing. If you were the event organizer for a larger group of people, So let's say if you and 4 of your friends are going to come and run games across the weekend. You've earned enough to cover all of your badges. You just need to remember that because you submitted it as a group, that each of your efforts are pooled together, and you earn badges based off of your combined efforts.
Yeah.
And you'll get one allocation as the event organizer.
Yep.
You'll assign those badges out as you need. But we're not going to audit to make sure that each person did exactly 70 hours.
Yeah. So we're not going to look at each individual person and determine that individual person ran 70 hours worth of, or 70 player hours worth of events. We'll pool that all together within the group or company name, and make sure that the total is enough to get the amount that you're requesting to be allocated. Yeah. So that's kind of the process on that. Those, I guess, if you're looking to be in the, you submit the allocation, but the allocation is not processed immediately. So if you have GMs or yourself who need a badge prior to that point to maybe get into the housing block or whatnot, and you'll probably talk about a lot of that stuff next week with Mike as we prep for badge registration. But if you need that badge ahead of time or needed it immediately, it's good to get an attendee badge, and then when you request your allocation, eventually once we assign it to you, or we give you the allocation and then you assign it to them, if you have both badges, they'll automatically be refunded.
So like, just as a general rule of thumb, if you're ever stressing out and you need a badge, just go buy a badge. If you're running events, you can always get it refunded later.
Yeah.
So badges are relatively straightforward. It really just kind of is that question of, if you are an independent GM and you haven't been running your events as part of any sort of group, then you just need to buy your attendee badge and you can deal with reimbursement after the show.
Yep.
If you are running events for a group or a company, you request an allocation, all of your events are pooled together. It's pretty straightforward. Most of the questions are going to be like case by case kind of things.
Yep.
But that's how badges work. And then hotel rooms, for independent GMs, it still kind of works the same way. If you have not submitted as part of a group, then just pay for your hotel room, book your hotel room, and submit for reimbursement afterward.
Yep.
If you are an independent gaming group, which means you don't have any substantial support from any companies, they're not providing you anything beyond maybe the rule books or something that you need to run the event. They're not giving you promotional material, they're not paying you, they're not giving you prizes or anything like that. Then you can, if you have enough player hours, you need 800 for a complimentary room, you can request that of Gen Con. We will do our best to provide you a room that's paid for ahead of time, that you don't have to pay for. And if you've already booked a room, you just need to request it to be canceled early enough. Yep. We have a block of GM rooms that we assign for those purposes. And then if you are a sponsored group or you are a company, we won't provide you a complimentary room. But if you do need more rooms beyond what you were able to get in your exhibitor block or anything like that, you can request additional rooms of us. And if we still have rooms left over in the GM block after we've accommodated all of the GMs, then we'll do our best to accommodate you in there as well. And beyond filling out the request form, that's kind of it. If you need complimentary rooms, the request form is going to ask for names and stuff like that. If you need rooms beyond what we're able to provide you complimentary, because maybe you earned one comp room and you want to buy another one because you want to spread people out, there's a separate form to just request a self-pay room and a little bit of a separate process for that.
Yep.
But that's all explained in the event host policy, and it's all linked off of the host page. And we're always happy to answer that question when you just email events@gencon.com and let us know what you need.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that pretty much covers what we wanted to talk about today.
Okay.
Unless there's anything additional that you have in mind.
Not that I can think of.
We can point out there is also, if you're brand new to the event hosting and event submitting process, we have also a page, tips for new EOs and GMs. And that kind of breaks it down a little more granular on like step-by-step what to do in that process. So if you're brand new, or you know somebody who is brand new and you want to give them a resource, that's another option as well. So yeah.
All right. Well, thank you to everybody for joining us.
Yep.
This has been our second event submission review. I'm sure that all of you are thrilled to get this guided tour through the event submission process.
It will be useful as well on the back end too. So if you weren't ready to learn all this stuff today, it will be up on YouTube, on our YouTube channel eventually. And all those will be there within the Gen Con News playlist. So you can thumb through and see like, oh, I want to know more about event types. So you would go to today's episode.
Yep. Next week, we should have Mike Boozer, the customer service manager, on to talk about badge reg, how that will work, what the parameters are for that. He will probably also cover at least some basic information on how hotel registration will work. And that is also something that people, especially first-time Gen Con attendees, are going to want to pay attention to so they get the full understanding of all the parameters of that. But thank you very much for joining us for our stream today. If there are any topics that you feel Gen Con needs to spend more time talking about, or you'd like some questions answered on, you can email us, or just let us know what you would like us to do in future streams.
Yeah.
Once event registration starts to come around in May, we will probably have more of these where we talk about different events you can sign up for. But any ideas you have on what we can do with streaming to help you or people you know kind of get a handle on how to deal with Gen Con, we would love to hear.
Yeah, and we'll ramp it up too as we go along to hype up Gen Con itself and be able to get everybody excited.
Maybe Kristen will bring back her hype streams.
I hope so. Those are also awesome.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. We're going to wave goodbye from a very chilly studio. Don't forget that we have the Brothers Murph on Monday nights. We have Peter Atkinson on Wednesday at noon with Fireside, still going through the history of Magic. We have Westgate Irregulars Wednesday 6:30. This week will be the third session of their narrative campaign on our channel.
A lot of fun.
And we, especially everybody loves the accents, I hear. And we have Table Takes every Friday at 11 a.m. And then we have new release rundown following that. And when we have news that we need to share with everybody, we try to put that on Friday after all of that.
Yep.
So thank you very much. Enjoy your weekend. Play some games.